Okay.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Three Consulting Amigos. And today we're going to be continuing to look at the 8 drivers of what you need in a good exit plan so you can get what you want out of it, sell it to whom you want, and do it at a time that's not only convenient, but gives you the greatest multiplication for your revenues. Today, Ron's going to be talking a little bit about stickiness of customers and defining the parameters of that in a way that will help you understand how to position your customers and stuff. So having said that, again, I want to welcome Ed and Ron to this conversation. And Ron, I'm just going to move ahead unless, Ed, you'd like to add something to the wheel before we move to Ron's presentation.
No, it just comes down to the value of an exit plan. It's very important for the future of your business. And as part of that exit plan, there are 8 drivers that optimize the value of your business, and all 8 of them are extremely important. And today we're going to be talking specifically about how you can differentiate yourself and your business from your competitors. And Ron's going to give more detail on that conversation.
Right. Okay, great. Here we go. So we have reviewed, we don't have to review each one of these. We've got those in previous videos. And the ones over here on the upper left tend to do with marketing. And so we're going to talk specifically, we know market potential is important. We know that growing revenue is important, and it's largely a marketing function. And also customers are extremely important. And so we're going to talk about differentiating our companies, an individual company, a firm, from its other competitors within that market. So that's stickiness of customers is really what we're going to target on. And we're going to broaden that, we're going to be under the same subject today, but we're really going to be talking about how do you get those customers to stay with you? How do you find them, sort of like flypaper, and how do you get them to stay over a period of time? So I'm going to move on to just open up another slide real fast here, and we will get started. So there are a couple of terms maybe that we might discuss, and generally speaking, there are different markets, of course, and the market potential really has to do with in whatever you're selling, and by that we're talking about you might be in industrial motors, so you're selling industrial motors. But within that, there's all kinds of subdivisions. Most companies don't sell regular motors and fractional horsepower motors, for instance. Those are 2 different businesses. Of course, you've got electric motors, and then you've got AC motors and DC motors. So as you continue to narrow that industrial niche, you end up creating specialization. So what we've done is we've thought this through very carefully and taken a look at a lot of customers, a lot of clients we've had over the years, and done a lot of research in order to really take a look at how you define a smaller sub-market, a crack in the market is what we call that, and how then you differentiate. And every time you differentiate, you're actually creating a slightly different market for your business, for a product, for a line of business, an SBU, so you have all of these things going on at one time, and it can get a little bit confusing in a large company. But for the most part, small companies tend to gravitate towards a much narrower focus on services, or a much narrower focus on their customers that they actually work with. So we're going to kind of explore each one of these first, and then we'll open it up for some general discussion here. So generally, we first have an industry, that would be, say, automotive. There's a geographic issue in markets. This is less and less so now with the internet, of course, but for the most part, you're either doing business in the United States or another country, or you might be doing business in your own county, or you might only be doing business in your own town, and maybe just doing business in the southeastern suburbs of that town. So there are certainly different levels and different markets. So you say, well, in the internet today, it doesn't really matter. Well, you know, if you've got a car wash, you're not going to really appeal to somebody in Northwest Denver if you live in South, if you're doing it in South, your car wash is in Southeast Denver, because that's a 20, 30-mile drive.
Well, you know, if I can make an observation here,
Yeah.
this could be helpful, Ron. You know, when you're talking about these, you know, given what we've just been through with the COVID and all that stuff, certainly this conversation is very relevant to restaurants who have typically a very specific uh, geographic focus. And, you know, so a lot of what I hear you saying is that depending on, as you'll go through this, I'm sure, you know, the size of the business and where it's located have a tremendous bearing on your capacity to be able to grow the business. Is that inaccurate?
Absolutely, and you could argue that if you've got restaurant number one, and we'll hope you're still in business, and it's got a general reach. If when you take a look at your customers, you've got a general reach of 10 miles. And you know, if you are if you're a fast food restaurant, it's maybe smaller than that. If you have a really fine dining, it might be 30 or 40 miles in some markets.
Interesting. Okay.
But for the most part, you've got some, and then you say we want to grow. Well, you want to go outside the 20 mile radius of, and so that you pick up a different and new market. You don't want to compete with yourself in the same market. And so that's, there is a case where, yes, a certain kind of a restaurant and a certain kind of dining is going to have a very specific geography, even though we're trying to add to service right now with COVID and by doing takeout and so forth and online ordering, there's still a geography because you can only deliver so many miles from home.
Right.
So, yeah.
Good observation.
And then, of course, and if we continue the restaurant metaphor, there's specialization. And, when you go to a restaurant, you typically don't go in and say, gee, let's go someplace that sells everything. Now, if you go into a little teeny town, and we've probably all been there, and you've got one cafe downtown, and they're going to sell chicken fried steak, and they're going to have a taco and a burrito. They may have a variety of things because they're really serving a general audience.
Right.
But into a bigger town, you've got a Mexican restaurant and a Chinese restaurant and a Thai restaurant, and it goes on. And everybody's aware that this just can continue to get more and more specialized. Japanese restaurants, certain kinds of cuisine from certain parts, Southern Italy, Sicilian specialty. Those are all specializations. And you've got specializations in all kinds of other things. We're going to talk about specialization in auto mechanics here in a few minutes. And so you've got people who just work on Corvettes, and people who just work on Jaguars, for instance. So that's
right.
kind of, yeah. And then you've got this element of specification and stickiness. Well, we kind of define stickiness as not able to let go. so it's like, what do companies do so that their customers have to come back to them? And if you're a restaurant, that's pretty hard to do because there's no specification. People don't walk in and say, give me a 3.5-inch burrito. They ask for a burrito, however they did. But when you're in a lot of industries, you're looking at parts that have to be absolutely perfect. So anything in machinery is like that. Certain things must be exactly right. You've got a tape dispenser. Many times only one kind of tape will fit in there. I've got one of those little labeling machines, and only one kind of labeling machine paper fits into that one. That's stickiness. It's like you buy the product and you have to buy the rest of it. You buy a printer today, and you're pretty much married to buying the cartridges from that company.
Right.
Yes, you can get knockoffs, I've got a printer on my desk right now. I bought the knockoffs for about half the money. Doesn't work. I think that HP has actually gotten so sophisticated that if you don't put in the right cartridge with the right chip, it won't work. And so that's what you call specification, and that causes stickiness because you just can't let go.
Yeah, I was just thinking in terms of your example of a printer, and I guess you guys can relate to that. I literally have 3 brother multi-function printers, and they all seem to use the same cartridge. That is until you buy them. And you realize each one, they create a chip inside it that only works with that particular printer. So how do you define that in terms of, you know, trying to you know, get stickiness in your customer and definition?
Well, it's just really, you know, it's hard to let go. And so the only way you can let go of buying that particular printer cartridge is to throw the printer away. So that's a hard separation there. You spend the money on the printer, it's like, you know, I'm so mad at HP for the 4th or 5th time now. I bought, I don't know, a dozen printers in the last, you know, dozen years maybe. You know, I'm so upset that I'm intending to look at another market, meaning the market where anybody can sell the ink to me.
Right.
That's not that easy to find.
Right.
The printers are not out there saying we can take all these different cartridges because the specification is simply too narrow, and you can't get a universal fix for that problem.
Well, you know, you've kind of hit on something that I think is significant in terms of customer power that I think has shifted. You know, it's like, I think in many cases, what we're seeing is a model reversed. And here's what I mean by that. Typically, you'd have Hewlett-Packard saying, okay, this is going to the printer we're going to make, and we're going to do lock-in, which is the term I've heard used, by making sure that this printer will only work with our brand of a printer cartridge.
Right.
But what I'm seeing happening is that the marketplace is kind of pushing back and saying, wait a minute, you know, I have choices here, and if you're going to do that, I'm going to find another printer that gives me more flexibility. Is that consistent with what you're saying, and how, as we move forward, you know, smart businesses are beginning to look at ways to kind of attract customers like you're talking about?
Oh yeah, no, I think that's true. And there are services, Consumer Reports actually goes through and does a very detailed analysis of printers, but they don't give you the price in terms of the printer cost. They give you the price of the entire cost of the ink over a period of a year.
Oh, okay, cool.
So what you're able to do is you're able to actually compare the total cost of utilizing the printer and the ink that comes with it. So there's your competitive, you know, this kind of jumping in again, because Consumer Reports, which is a nonprofit, but that's an organization that attempts to give consumers the kind of information they need to make real decisions. And so, you know, when you have the information, then you might just decide that you're just not going to put up with X company. You're going to try something different. There's another way to do it too, and that is you create stickiness by saying to a business, we're going to sell you a range of 5 or 6 printers. They all use the same cartridge.
Yeah, there you go.
You can buy one single cartridge. Now, I'm not sure, I can't swear that there's a company that does that very well, but I see that as a marketplace.
Yes.
That would be a crack in the market that would basically say, we will interchange all of our print cartridges with all of our printers, and you can be guaranteed that you only have to stock one single cartridge in order to be able to always replace the next one that's out. So instead of having, you know, a backup set of cartridges for 10 printers, you've only got 2 sets for the next to go out. I would find, as a business person, I would find that extremely attractive today.
Right.
And I would absolutely just simply say all printers will be this brand from this moment on, because this is how we want to.
That's a true differentiator.
Yeah.
I want to give an example I heard recently. All of us have played with Legos at one point or another. We have literally 3 boxes that are a foot by a foot by a foot, in which the kids have all these Lego pieces that they had from their childhood. And we dragged them out when Justin was here, and it was just amazing to watch them. What I learned recently, what's really fascinating, if you now go to Lego and say, look, all I need, I want to design this particular thing, and I need these 6 pieces. Can you send them to me? And they will. So, I mean, they've driven, if I understand what you're saying, Ron, they literally drove the market directly to the customer by saying, instead of giving you all these parts you don't need, you only have to order the ones you do.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah, that would be one way to do it. And of course, once you get started on Legos, it's hard to say. Brio trains the same thing. You've got a certain kind of track, and it has to be the right width, and you don't want 3 or 4 kinds of track because you can't do anything with it. So you just keep buying the same thing.
Right.
We bought a Brio train for one of our kids when they were really little, and now we've got 7 grandchildren playing with the same thing.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
The interesting thing is that instead of a little round circle today, you can build a giant railroad.
Yes.
8 by 10 feet, because we just kept buying the same thing over and over.
Yeah.
I should have a discount from Brio for being such a good customer. and that kind of thing is another way to develop stickiness, is that, when you can put together a system that keeps people involved, and that could be a frequent air mile kind of club.
Right.
It could be a long-term discount program where the more you buy, the more discount you get, say, in a period of time.
Right.
It could be buy 9 and get 1 free, to keep people, purchasing over time by rewarding them with something else that they want. And that's another form of stickiness. And frankly, not very many businesses do well at that kind of thing, small businesses.
No, I agree. Ed, I'm going to ask you a question here, because basically each of us represent a different expertise in the middle of a business. From your perspective as a CPA and somebody who helps companies develop exit plans, how do you help create the stickiness for yourself as you're moving with these customers?
Well, it's a process, and you have to go through these questions, these general topics that Ron has put up on the screen. You have to tell your story to the potential buyer as to why this business is worth a higher multiple than another business. And one of the big reasons for an increased multiple is how sticky you are to your customer, and are you providing something, a service or a product to someone that cannot be provided by someone else. And if you're in that type of a situation, you are a very unique business, and you're not a commodity business. Because the one thing you don't want to be when you're selling your business is a commodity business where someone can pick one of 10 different companies to provide a certain product or service. So the more you can specialize and become sticky with a certain group of customers, that allows you to charge a higher sales multiple for selling your business.
Right. Now, I would argue that consultants really jump down to the bottom, which is relationship. It's very difficult to create stickiness. You might say that a CPA who's done your taxes for year after year after year, has all of your records, knows everything about your business, and therefore it's harder to leave because they have that history with you. But more generally, it's a relationship that really causes the stickiness to happen for professional services. And we'll talk more about that because that's one of the more powerful ones. So let's move on. Distribution control is very interesting. In the olden days, 10 years ago and more, it was amazing how the distributors really had the ability to control goods. Until relatively recently, I'm talking 5 years, 6 years, to come up with a food product and try and get it placed into a large grocery chain was just nearly impossible and very expensive. And the reason is because the store already has a relationship with a distributor that provides canned goods or provides fresh produce or meat, etc. And they kind of have an understanding that, you know, we're going to be giving you X amount of products, and we also are going to pay for X amount of space called slotting fees on the shelf. So they're actually buying space on the shelf. And if that shelf space in the green beans section is already spoken for, it doesn't matter how good your green beans are, you are not going to get in that store. The other side of that is that very large organizations who buy lots of things from other people, whether it be parts for manufacturing or finished goods like a store, they don't really have time to listen to everybody who has a new idea, or even not a new idea, an old idea that wants to get inside the store. They don't have that time. So, you know, if you see 30,000 items in a store, there are 450,000 items that would like to be there. They can't talk to you. The only way you're going to have a presentation is to break through somehow, or you go to the distributor and say, would you take on my product? And then they're going to say, well, you've got to guarantee that we can sell X amount of this. There's all kinds of things that go on in that back room behind the scenes that the business person has very little understanding of. Particularly the new business person has no concept of that. So markets are actually shaped and controlled by the distribution system way more than you think that it is. But that is breaking down due to the internet and what's going on with instant shipping. So that is less of a problem than it used to be for businesses. And
well, let me, if I can, you know, you've kind of identified something that we all now know is to be real disruptive, and that is how Amazon, you know, changed the distribution model so radically that other companies are now finding it difficult to keep up. Is that a fair assessment of that?
That's exactly right. The disruption, it has not only been a disruption to retail, it's been a huge disruptor for the distribution and warehouse industries, because they're not only selling directly to the consumer, they're also doing the distribution, shipping, packing, the whole enchilada. They do everything to make the product themselves. So, you know, the only way you get out of that loop is to be a manufacturer. And then you can be at their mercy because they control so many markets. So absolutely, they have changed the face of distribution.
Very, thank you. That's, I appreciate that. You know, and we're seeing, you know, in response to that, seems like all the large retailers, you know, have moved to some kind of an internet model, but to my experience, none of them have really been able to penetrate as well as Amazon. What do you attribute that to?
Well, what they've done is they have tried to break down as many of these things that we're talking about as possible.
Okay.
First of all, they broke down the distribution system. Secondarily, they broke the geographic barriers by offering everything to everybody via the internet. And thirdly, they have gotten big enough to really offer a wide variety of almost everything that is for sale is there. So they've kind of taken on the great disruptors moniker. They have as high as 70% of the shopping online. There are others kind of threaten that. Etsy is one company, but if you take a look at the growth rate of Etsy compared to Amazon, you're talking about a mountain compared to a little molehill. I mean, it is really a stark difference, and Etsy is one of the successful ones.
Interesting. Okay. I didn't mean to distract you, but I think to help our audience understand from your experience working, as you said, small business is not big business. And I wasn't trying to distract us, but the truth is small business has to operate in the world of big business. It's kind of like, I can use a metaphor, during the time of dinosaurs, you had small mammals who had an advantage that really came about when the dinosaurs were too big to handle it.
That's what we call, in marketing, that's what I call the keep your head down strategy.
Yeah, okay.
Well, if you can hide from the dinosaur's big mouth, then you're probably going to thrive in another ecosystem. And every time you have another ecosystem, that's another market crack in the market. The market works exactly the way the ecosystem does. And that is that there are lots of spaces for all kinds of millions and millions and millions of kinds of plants, animals, and insects, etc. And if you look closely at each one of those, they all survive because they specialize.
Right.
They've all found their
very
own
good. Yeah.
niche, their own niche. So what we do in marketing is absolutely, and the economy is absolutely no different than nature. It's just the way.
Well, I think, and if the truth is I'm listening to this, Ron, and one of the things that I think Ed is saying and we're saying together is that too many businesses start because they have a technical skill. I'm going to be a plumber, as an example. I'll just use that, without ever thinking through these elements, which really will grow your business. Is that fair?
Well, yeah, they do it. They sort of do it automatically. So, we've talked about several different kinds of businesses, and in each one of those cases, you've got people who say, I'm going to specialize in old Jaguar repair.
Right.
Why? Oh, I don't know. I like Jaguars. I'm good with Jaguars. They always break down. They're one of the worst vehicles,
Right.
Which is absolutely true. And so as a result, it's like, that seems like that would be something good, a good place to be. I don't know anybody else who is an authorized, used vintage Jaguar repairman.
Right.
And so they just start. And you know what? If they land in one of these cracks, they can grow and be successful.
Right.
But what happens also is that you have an Amazon come in and start pushing everybody around. And if they're going to get serious about how they're going to survive, they have to be serious about thinking all of these characteristics of markets that we're talking about right now.
Interesting. Okay. So to go back to that metaphor, obviously a Jaguar restoring company in rural America will not survive, whereas a Jaguar here in LA will probably survive because the market is big enough. Is that kind of what you're saying?
It will absolutely survive because I base my example that we're going to get to here in a few minutes on a real case study. Yes.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
So then we get into Referral and Sym-Bionic, and these are just as they state. There are businesses that literally get all their business based on referral. Now, they're very much subject to the success of the referring company, but I know of a company specifically that rebuilds engines, and they get 95% of their business from the guy's brother-in-law because he owns a big auto body shop. So he just sits back and hopes his brother-in-law is successful because he gets the referral. The Sym-Bionic kind of circumstances, as it suggests, it's where both parties get something out of it. You have a lot of partnerships where they do referral back and forth because they match different components. We kind of have some symbiotic referrals between the three of us because we know what each other does. We run into a new client that could use it, and so that's another way to create a market, and it's a legitimate way. And then authenticity is a fun one because you kind of go, well, what does that mean? Well, the interesting thing is authenticity is the opposite of Amazon, because Amazon doesn't represent anything that's authentic because they don't make anything. All they do is they sell and distribute it. So you could say, well, they're authentically Amazon because they invented Amazon, and Amazon Prime is authentic as far as it goes. But some better examples of authenticity can be found. One of them is that Disneyland is the only authentic new era theme park. Now,
Wow.
there are other people that have copied them over the years, but apparently nobody does it quite as well as they do because they're way bigger than everybody else and they're worldwide. And they've been able to really create new standards that in a wide variety of things. They're the people who say there won't be a single flake of paint off of any piece of equipment in the entire park, and actually do that.
Right.
They have set standards of entertainment and excitement and experience so high that, and everybody knows this, that, and this is, Ray, where you say, but the small business is competing with the big one. That's right. Everybody knows what that authentic experience is, and they all measure everybody else based on that.
No, I think that's an excellent example. And as I was thinking about your comment about two large companies that kind of overlap, one is FedEx, absolutely positively overnight. And what I think is kind of fascinating is that Amazon's authenticity is kind of based on that same model. You know, if you go Prime, we're going to get it to you overnight. And for the housewife or even us, it's just so convenient. You know, 3 clicks and next morning there it is.
Yeah, and so when you think of absolutely positively overnight, I mean, you give Federal Express the credit for that if you've been around very long.
Yeah, right.
It used to be that we were all excited to get something overnight because it took 3 to 7 days to get it in the old days, and so they absolutely changed the paradigm in quick delivery, and they opened the door for Amazon and the internet to really work very, very well. So,
right.
And then here's a whole different kind of authenticity, just as an example. When Molly and I decided to go up and spend a little bit of time in the big trees up by in the redwoods, we ran into this little place that was right on the edge of the park. They couldn't get into the park. It was right on the edge of the park. It looked sort of interesting, kind of from the outside, but we weren't really sure about it yet. We just kind of took a chance on it. When we got there, we found this place that seemed almost like Hotel California. We weren't sure if we could check out or not.
You could come in, but you could never leave.
Yeah, and it was a strange experience. When you went into the big open reception, which was really also the bar, which was really also the lobby, which was also the, you know, where all the checks, bookkeeping was being done. There's a piano in the corner with an old 30, 40 year old mannequin laying across the top, you know, of the piano. And then as we looked around, we started to realize that there are all kinds of these old, you know, not really antiques, sort of 40s vintage things.
Right.
And the hotel was built about 1945, 1948, just after the war. And then we began to look around and we noticed a lot of bikes and so forth. Well, it turns out that this particular location is picked as part of the Route 66 German vigil that is taken by bikers from Germany. Now, it's not on Route 66. That's just to describe this market of Germans who ride their Harleys in the United States, and they specifically go to places that were from the 30s to the 50s.
Wow.
And it was one of those places that had just maintained complete and total authenticity. It was what it was. And so as we got comfortable, with it, and we had breakfast with some Germans, and they told us all about how they'd studied it online, and this was one of the places that's high on everybody's list. And so, we realized, well, there's an interesting market.
Yeah.
This little hotel in the middle of California has a German specialty market. And it's as authentic as you can get. I can tell you that for sure.
Yeah. Wow.
So there's something about authenticity that people like. They want real 501 Levi's.
Yeah. Yeah.
They want to have anything that's expensive or is truly authentic is going to create more. You're going to get more margin for it. That has a lot to do with having a brand that has a lot of history, that says something to a large group of people. And it could be a pen, it could be a writing pen. Who's that big writing company?
Right.
I can't remember the name. It could be
a Mont Blanc.
Yeah, Mont Blanc. A Mont Blanc's always going to be a Mont Blanc.
And and if you see one, you realize that guy's got taste.
Yeah, that's right. And you take one out and you hold it in your hand and you think, my goodness, this is really an authentic, this is the real thing. And of course, there are many of those. It's harder and harder to be authentic, but some small businesses have been successful in creating authenticity. And that's another way to differentiate yourself from everybody else. Now, here's one that we've added in, and that's the internet keyword ownership. And this brings us back to Amazon. And that is that Amazon has done well partially because they understand the internet. Many other websites don't. And they think that they have to have a website. And so they buy a website. They have somebody build them a website. And then they think they're done, but they're not even close. Because what has happened is that they have not paid attention to the appropriate things that some people call SEO, search engine optimization. It's bigger than that, but we can use that word for now. But that they don't have ownership, meaning that there are some terms that you type in and you get to their website. So, if you have a brand name, and it's maybe even a big name, and if you were to type in Mont Blanc right now, or certainly Mont Blanc pens, you would get to the right site within the top 3.
Right.
If you do fountain pens, who knows where you're going to go.
Right.
But if you have Acme pens, and nobody's ever heard of it, you are not going to get found on the internet because you haven't taken time to develop your brand, your keyword development, and your own authenticity. And so if you haven't developed that, you're not going to get found nearly as often on the web, on a website, and therefore you have limited this new cyber marketplace.
What's fascinating, you and I have a shared customer that has one of those very, very unique products. I'm talking about the door company that also has a small area where they manufacture these window slides. And the interesting thing about those window slides, if you're restoring an old home, no matter where you are in the United States, this is the only place you can get one.
Yeah, also in Australia.
Oh, is that right?
Oh, yeah. We used to sell lots of them to Australia. And that, as a result of that, because we built their website, we were able to increase their online business to about 2/3 or 3/4 of all their business combined.
Oh, yeah. It makes a lot of sense.
That's because they had a good old-fashioned name brand, and because we made very sure that anybody typing that in would find a page that had as many possible combinations of the product description, the name, etc., as we could possibly do. And as a result, it was very successful and probably helped capture somewhere in the range of 50 to 60% of the worldwide demand for that product.
Good example. So, and I think that's what we're trying to do here is demonstrate to customers that, by differentiating, on a specific thing, you can have a profound impact on the growth of your business, which is what the driver that Ed was really referring to.
Well, and so if you want to say, well, that everybody should be able to do that, if your business hasn't thought about differentiating in anything or specializing, then what exactly are the terms going to be that you use?
Yeah, got it.
Merchandise? Okay, I don't think anybody will find you. If you
Right.
are a plumber that specializes in antique hardware, now you have a chance. If you do roto-rooting, then you have in a geographic area, now you have a chance. So it's the specialization and the bringing your market crack down to something you can compete in, small enough so you can compete well in that crack, and then you're able to figure out how to do the keywords. The problem we run into is most small companies don't ever even consider what we've been talking about.
Let's talk a little bit, because you have these relationships. Your son, Ben, created a business that probably a lot of people would say, how can you make it in a pool fencing business? Give us a little insight as to how he used these principles to kind of capture a very interesting niche.
Well, he was like so many other businesses that just said, this looks like this might work. I think I'll give it a try. And so he didn't really take advantage of this like he might have.
Okay. Well, you're his father, so I understand those things.
But right. And nonetheless, though, I might have had some influence on him. And there are several things that are interesting about that. So if we kind of go through this category, the general industry was safety fences for pools. His geography started with the Inland Empire, moved, and then he added in the LA Basin, then he added in San Diego, and then he got the lower desert, and then he got Sacramento. And the reason he got each one of these geographic areas was because he was outperforming all of the other distributors.
Wow.
And then he found other people to do installations in each one of these. Now, the specialization might seem, well, that's not a big deal, but there are only 3 or 4 companies that really do any fence, pool fence, safety fences at all in the country.
Wow.
That's a very, very small opportunity to find the material itself. So it's highly specialized. It doesn't have very much stickiness because there's no reason to come back after you're done. So that he's never took care of that. He controls the distribution geographically for his particular fence completely and entirely. And so there is no way he'll ever have to compete on price with his own product.
So are you saying that he actually developed his own product, which is different than his competitors?
He just developed a relationship with the manufacturer that it helped.
Okay.
That was that exclusive arrangement.
Right.
Which is common for these kinds of things. And that's the distribution control. He had total control over distribution. Now, not over the other ones, but him. And then he has a lot of people, because he does a good job, he has a lot of people who do referrals. Sym-Bionic, all the pool companies that do pool cleaning know who he is because his name is on the pool fence. And so they tend to use him more than they use others.
Cool. Yeah.
I don't know that there's any authenticity here. Of course, all the things we talked about really created the keyword, and he owns keywords for both the products and each geography. I think he has 5 websites or 6 websites. The reason is that you can't really have authenticity by using the same website across the whole country if in fact you're geographically oriented. So he did spend the time.
But that's it. If I can interrupt, the value of that is he figured out that in order to make this work, Ron, he had to create websites that were regional, even though he was more statewide.
Well, he did listen to us on that one. He wouldn't have gotten that one by himself.
Okay, cool.
We did help a little bit on that. So we did that, and then there is no relationship at all. It's a buy and leave kind of thing. So, but
Right.
you can see just going through each one of those, he hit enough of them to almost guarantee success, with the exception of good service and price.
Well, and if I can differ with you on this regard, what fascinates me as you share this story, he had an incredible relationship with his supplier network. I mean, to get an exclusive relationship, they would not have given him that if they hadn't seen some real profitable opportunities for them. So that was one thing. For the other thing that you're talking about, that symbiosis with pool cleaners, once they realize and they get a new customer and they need a fence, who's the first person they go to?
Yeah. And
so that's where I would differ with you. I think he's done a magnificent job of building these relationships that have enabled him to grow his business.
I didn't mean to infer in any way that he hasn't, because he has done a terrific job.
Right.
All I'm suggesting is that it makes natural common sense. And
right.
So, the performance part was you work really hard and you outperform the other guy, and he doesn't do well, and they're looking for a distributor. Who do they go to? They go to the successful one. And
right.
that's how he took over all these territories, is because
right.
he did understand the paramount need for absolute customer satisfaction.
Right.
And he also understood the whole sales thing and how to close, because his referrals come in by telephone. They see him on the website, and occasionally he gets emails, but basically he is very, very good about getting all the information, giving them a price nearly immediately, and closing them very, very quickly. That's
cool.
that he learned. And of course, that's not really the market. That's really a sales thing. So that's kind of we spent a long time on this, but we've had good discussion in between. So what I thought I would do here is very quickly go through and just reiterate. There are all of these different levels. They start with geographic, go into specialization, et cetera. And finally, in the middle, we have a relationship. We haven't talked about relationship very much, but let's take a second to talk about that. One of the best defensive marketing things you can do is to have strong relationships with your customers. Now that can take several forms, but relationship management, or relationship customer control, as some people call it, is I used to call it relationship marketing back in 1992 when I developed this concept before anybody had ever written about relationship marketing. Relationship marketing is really the premier way to get and maintain clients. And I believe that that's the reason that I have a customer relationship average of about 13 years, because I like the people that I do business with, and I make sure that I do everything I can to do the best possible job. Right. And to look forward, et cetera, et cetera. But the relationship is important. And when you're selling services and intangibles, the relationship is really, really key. And the interesting thing is that you can literally protect yourself from competitors, because the truth of the matter is that when you're satisfied with somebody who's providing services, you don't even listen to the emails that come in.
Right.
And so that has been how I built my business, is based on
right.
Before I had the opportunity to observe all of these other things that we looked at here. So very briefly, just to summarize, if we take a look at geographic, and we're going to talk now about the XKE, the Jaguar guy. The story is that my boss in a national consulting firm had a Jaguar, and it kept breaking down, and so he had to take it into the shop all the time. He finally got to the point to where he just bought a second one, and when both of them were running, he let his wife drive the second one, but he also had a Honda for her if both of them, if only one of them was running, which was most of the time. Well, in other presentations, I've shown how Consumer Reports indicates factually that Jaguar is one of the worst performing quality-wise when you look at reliability of any car in the market in the world.
Wow.
Yet somehow they're able to get a lot of money for that.
Right.
That's because of the beauty and the style of the car, and the authenticity is probably
Right. Right.
So you can survive even if you don't have the best product. So in this case, he had a guy that he loved down in Los Angeles that only worked on used Jaguars, and so this is the example. So he's in Los Angeles geographically. Now, you know, my boss lived in Riverside, but that didn't matter. He was willing to go to Los Angeles.
To get this repaired.
Yeah.
I wanted, not to interrupt you, Ron, but we're about at the end of our hour. What
Really?
I'd like you to think about is that, you know, there is, as you said, an enormous amount of stuff to cover here. Can you kind of give us a segue from this episode so that we can kind of pick this up next episode?
Yeah, we can. I think this is actually finishing up very quickly because we've really gone through it. So I'll be done here in about 3 or 4 minutes. And if you don't mind.
No, not at all. Not at all.
This Referral and Sym-Bionic, he had a lot of dealers and other car clubs who gave him referrals. There was no doubt about the authenticity of the product and of his situation. And because of his relationship, looks like this is misspelled here, but I assume his English was better than this. Do you want an appointment this month? And then the question is—
Oh, he was French.
Yeah, right. And the question really is, you know, one of your cars has to come in, you know, every other month. And so which one do you want to put in? And literally they would reschedule and reschedule and reschedule. And so they developed a relationship. And my boss used to go on and on about this guy and how he was so great. And, you know, I mean, just amazing. But that was a individual guy, ended up hiring 3 or 4 mechanics, had business from throughout Southern California, and was highly successful. And, you know, he didn't mean to do it necessarily, but he fit every one of these things, and so survives at very high prices and lives a nice lifestyle. And so finally, just to kind of wrap this up, you've got a niche industry, you have geographics, California, distribution control. This guy had a license for Southern California to handle this specialized and to get authentic parts from Jaguar. And so he was able to control his own distribution. So he managed to deal with that. Of course, we all know there's authenticity with the Jaguar. He built relationships with every one of his customers. And so he ended up really satisfying all of those. And next is the Moat Strategy, which has a lot of the same kinds of things, but that really takes us into the next subject if we continue to want to talk about that. And so with that, that's it. We can kind of summarize if you would like to, and I'll get this off the screen.
Yeah, I think, Ed, what are your thoughts? I think maybe it would make sense.
I'd like to make a couple points. And
Sure.
First, that was an excellent presentation on how to develop a valuable product or service and how to sell it and what makes your business unique from a marketing perspective. And it shows me a lot of times that many companies focus on sales and they don't think about marketing. And when I listen to Ron talk and present the marketing story, marketing, in my opinion, is the most important part of your business, because that tells you how to sell and makes your sales pitch more effective. So I think a lot of companies are just focused on getting somebody in front of somebody's face to try to make a deal. You got to have a marketing strategy, and so that you can sell more product or more service. Which keeps in mind also another point is, why is all this relevant to an exit strategy?
Yeah, right.
Well, an exit strategy is to optimize your cash flow for the future and to be able to differentiate yourself from your competitors as to why you're selling your business at a higher multiple than what has sold in the past. And to me, that's a worthwhile investment. You're going to learn things by going through this journey on how to make your sales presentation more effective. You're going to learn more about what your products are and how they meet the needs of your customers. And that's really going to make a difference in the sales price of your business. And unfortunately, most business owners never look at this stuff. They start with an idea and they move forward. But by looking at it in a very disciplined manner, as Ron has put on the screen, it really adds a lot of value as part of the exit strategy. And I would venture to say that if you're going to look at your story is the most important part of selling your business. And your story has to deal with top line revenue. Because if you can show a potential buyer that your top line revenue is robust and has tremendous growth opportunities, you're going to be able to sell your business for a higher price.
Well, if I can make an observation here too, that's relevant. When Ed and I were working together at this one company, you know, there are two ways of growing. You can grow organically, which is what you've been describing here, Ron. But once you've had this clearly defined, I think one of the things that Ed did, which was fascinating, Ed said, well, look, is it possible to find other businesses that we can simply acquire that already fit our model? And that was one of the ways in which we were able to grow this business that they had never even thought about, because a lot of what you've talked about, Ron, once it became clear in their mind, they realized that there were many ways to reach their long-term exit goal, and organic growth was only one of them. Acquisition was another one they had never even thought of.
Yeah, well, and so, you know, that's an interesting situation, a slightly different subject, because typically good marketing strategists will tell you, do not widen the breadth of your offerings, deepen them. And the reason for that is that if you end up having to deal with 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 or 10 markets, cracks in the market, it takes a lot of resources to keep that going. But if you have more depth in a single thing, what you're doing is you're controlling more of that market. You're actually increasing the value, I think, by having a bigger market share of a smaller marketplace, as long as it's protected and nobody else can take it away.
Right. No, I understand that. But what Ed had got them to think about is that there were smaller competitors who were struggling in the marketplace, but had opportunities and had customer lists, etc. And so they were able to acquire them and bring them into the fold. So that's what we're talking about.
And for direct competitors, that's an excellent way to do that. And we all know companies that do that very well. We have one right here in town that has bought out every single one of their competitors. And it's $1 billion business today because they got rid of them when they were young.
Yeah.
So that's one way to do it. And they haven't changed their market a bit.
Yeah, exactly. Well, exactly.
Can we go back to the drivers again?
Sure.
Let's bring up the picture of the drivers, because the bottom line to these drivers is that you got to look at all of them.
Yes.
Yeah. And, you know, focusing on why you're different from your competitors, which we just got a great lesson on, is very important. But also being able to look at other businesses that are for sale, maybe even look at divesting in some of the products that don't make any sense for you, might make some sense. But probably the one that nobody ever looks at is partnerships. Because sometimes you can have a partnership with somebody that has a relevant service or product to yours, where you can combine your resources and come up with something to meet a market need that you don't have to buy somebody else. Mm-hmm. So that's why partnerships are also important. But getting back to the wheel that we have, the 8 drivers, I really think you have to look at all 8 drivers for optimizing your business. And that's what we've been talking about today. We took one of the 8 drivers and spent a lot of time showing the value. And as we go through more and more of these sessions, we'll be talking about the other 7 drivers that also help you optimize the value of your business.
Well, I think one of the things you're saying here, Ed, and this is why it's valuable to have you, because you've worked inside of a big company in which you really had to do this. You know, it wasn't a matter of choice, it was a matter of necessity. And I think that's the point, is that as a CEO, you can't just focus on one. You have to have the resource and the tools and the people to be able to move all of them forward concurrently. Because if you don't, you know, ultimately you could get killed by one that you hadn't paid attention to. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Absolutely, and that's why the exit strategy that we're talking about is extremely important to anybody who is thinking about getting to selling their business over the next 3 years.
Right. Ron, can you bring that up? Because I'd like to have Ed kind of key us up for next week and which one we're going to focus on, given that we've just pretty clearly defined this one.
Yes, I thought I had it up. Just a moment here. Yes, I did. I forgot to share it with you. Sorry.
That's all right. The beatings will continue until morale improves.
That's right.
I think one of them that is really important that we haven't talked about, and that is looking at capital, high ROI capital projects that could have a significant impact on your business. And I find a lot of times that businesses are willing to spend money every week rather than spending money in an investment that could save them money over the next 5 years. And I don't know why that is, but that is an inherent philosophy of a lot of different business owners. They'll pay more for something, some type of an expense, because they're not willing to make an investment. And if you're paying 5% for your money from a bank, and you can get a return of 20 or 30% on an investment, that makes a lot of sense for you to grow your business and make it more profitable and make it more valuable to sell when you sell it to somebody else.
So as I understand this, what we're going to do next week, Ed, is that we're going to kind of let you focus on how to invest in high ROI projects and help people understand why, you know, when you can get money at 2.5%, it makes a lot of sense to look at investments where you can actually go through the numbers, and that's your expertise to be able to tell you, you know, why wouldn't you do something when you can make 20% on your money?
Or another way of looking at it, Ray, you may have 4 opportunities to invest money. How do you prioritize?
Yeah, good point. Thank you. Right.
And a lot of times people do this based upon off the cuff.
Yeah.
I believe this is what we should do. Well, let's look at the numbers.
Yeah, exactly.
Justify what you're really saying.
Right. And I think the neat thing about this, Ron kind of walked us through, you know, how important it is to really get the story right on who you're selling to and what you're selling, you know, so that as you move forward and you've got opportunities for better equipment or better people or better suppliers, like you said, you know, can I get a relationship like Ben did with the guy who actually manufactures and get an exclusive license? You know, those are the sorts of things I hear you saying that make a lot of sense as we move into the next circle on this. So having said that, gang, I want to thank you. Unless there's something else, we've run a little bit over, but this was very valuable. As again, Ron, thank you so much for sharing your expertise and your knowledge with us. Ed, I'm really excited. I'm looking forward to hearing what you have to say about ROI projects, because I know that's near and dear to your heart. So with that, this is the Three Amigos. We're concluding this session, and we look forward to talking to you next week, in which we're going to be looking at investing in high ROI projects with Ed Lasak. Thank you so much.
Yeah.